So we're up here at the Sharp House on the tribal grounds right above where the powwow is held. And we're going to be going on a little plant walk to see what spring plants are available for us to forage and harvest on tribal property this spring. All right. So this here is our wild violet. And it's one of the first plants to bloom in the spring. It's great for salad, and they contain a whole lot of vitamin C. They're a little bit tart, like have a little lemony flavor. And tastes kind of like green spinach, like in a spinach salad. But these are great first plant to be able to harvest and gather when you're looking for some spring things to forage. And they contain a whole lot of vitamin C, so it's really good during the end of winter, the beginning of spring. Our immune systems need extra support, and that vitamin C provides that extra support. So this little violet is great. And it also, the flowers are beautiful too, and edible as well. And they make a great garnish on a salad or a dish. Violets these spring violets are one of the plants that would be present both in our homelands in the Great Lakes and pretty much all over North America. You can find a species of violet growing. So it's a great plant to know about for foraging, because pretty much anywhere you are, you can have it be available. You can develop a relationship with it and look for it every spring. It's a clear sign that spring is on its way. Oh yeah, with the violets, I like to add it to a spring salad and with wild rice, and you can make a nice vinaigrette with some maple cider, maple vinegar, and you add the violets, some dandelion greens, some chickweed, things that you'd forage around here in the spring. Even things like redbud blossoms go great with that. And then if you wanted, you could add some mountain mint, which is a good tarragon replacement for a spice to make the dressing. So these are the leaves of the dandelion, which are great spring tonic and great bitters. Bitters help release digestive juices in your stomach and provide some good enzymes for digesting all the food that you eat. And that's why they're great in the spring. They're good for transitioning from a winter diet onto a spring diet of greens. And after, the holiday season, all your candies and meats and cakes and pies, all that kind of stuff, your body needs a good spring tonic. And dandelions is one of the best things that you can have for cleaning out your liver and your kidneys. And then, so these guys, the greens, are really bitter and kind of like arugula, but really good for you. And then the flowers are the opposite. They're kind of sweet and light and florally. And our language director, Justin Neely, makes some great dandelion jelly out of the blossoms of dandelions. So they're a good complement to each other, because this is kind of strong and bitter, the greens are, and then the flowers are really kind of light and florally. And as well, it's also, the whole plant is good. Let me see if there's a root down here, because the root is, that's kind of a small tap root. But the root right here is another great tonic for your livers and kidney, or your liver and your kidneys. And what you do here is you would chop it up and dry it out and make a tea with it. And I do that every spring, and you can drink the tea for 4 or 5 days before you should transition to not drinking it, because you don't want some of those medicines to build up in your body. There's a good side and a bad side to all medicines, and you got to balance that out. But the dandelion root is good for a spring tea, really any time. Dandelion's also another great one because it grows everywhere. People call it a weed, but a weed is kind of just a plant that you don't know how to use, and so you don't know its gifts, what it gives to you. And dandelion has so many gifts to give. It's such a generous plant that we should all be thanking dandelion and getting to know dandelion better. So these are elderberries, or baskamin in the language, which just means popgun wood, and that's because the stems are hollow, and kids can make little toys out of them. So elderberry, or baskamin, is another wonderful plant, and it's one that we have in our homelands in the Great Lakes, and we also have down here in the Southern Plains. Its berries are the medicine, and its berries have a substance, a chemical compound in them that is actually the only known antiviral plant compound. Most plants are antibacterial, like mints and things like that. They'll protect you against bacteria. But elderberries have an antiviral compound in them, which makes them especially important for us right now. And so last year we offered a elderberry syrup making workshop, and we had some folks come out and learn how to do that. And elderberries are also great plants because they are sequentially blooming, which means they have a long harvesting season. And if you are busy or forgetful or anything like that, you can usually find ripe elderberries growing anytime during the summer. And that's why I like them, because even if you aren't available the whole season, you still can have access to the elderberries. But you should know that when working with elderberries, the fresh fruit is toxic. So you have to dry it or cook it or freeze it to be able to make the syrup. Cool. All right, so here we have a plethora of plants. There's just loads of good plants to forage around here. Medicines, teas, good culinary herbs. So let's just start with this spring garlic, this wild garlic we have here. And this is in the onion family. Garlics and onion are the same, in the same family. And let's see if I can grab the bulb. This one is pretty strong, so you have to use it sparingly, but it's a good spring one. And yeah, generally any bulb that is less than the size of your pinky fingernail should be planted back in the ground, because it's too small, it's not ready. But yeah, lots of people use this one, lots of different tribes around here. In its whole range, really, across most of the eastern half of North America, people use it. And like I said, it's called wild garlic, meadow garlic, spring onion, and it's pretty strong, so has that typical onion flavor. Kind of tastes like scallions or green onions, and then typical onion smell that would give it away. Now with this one, there are some lookalikes, so you have to be careful. There's crow poison and a couple other plants in the in different plant families that are actually toxic. So if you pick it and you don't smell that garlicky onion smell, then you should generally leave it alone. And just in general, if you don't know what you're doing, you should have someone go out with you who knows what they're doing more to pick, because I would hate for someone to get sick and end up in the hospital. But yeah, the spring onions are great, and lots of people around here use the onions to make spring onions and eggs, or wild onions and eggs is a common dish around here in Oklahoma. Up north in our homelands, they would be using wild ramps, or they're also called wild leeks. But it's a similar plant, and it just grows in the forest instead of in the prairies. And for this one, when you're using it, you mostly use the greens and not really the bulb, because the bulb's pretty small. These generally come up, anywhere from mid-February to now, and they'll start flowering pretty soon. So it's a short season for this one. Once it's flowering, I generally don't harvest it anymore, because at that point the resources of the plant are going into the flower and producing the next generation of seed. But this is another one. The wild onion is another one that really benefits from a relationship to humans and us. They need us just as much as we need them. So, because they can get all, like you see here, where they're growing all packed in together. If people don't come in and harvest and spread them out, then they'll just start, competing for resources, kind of choking each other out. Oh yeah, there's a bunch over there that's really tight. And this was actually an area, I had some elders along this creek here tell me that, when they were growing up in the 40s and 50s, every spring there would be lines of cars and people would be out here in this field picking onions and blackberries. And so this is kind of a significant area for the tribes around here. Oops. Okay. So here we have what's known as cleavers, or sticky willy, some people call it that. And it's sticky willy because, ooh, hey, it's sticking to my hand. It has these little hairs on it that make it stick just about anything. And when in the fall or in the summer, when it goes to seed, it has little kind of burrs that stick everywhere all over animals, and that's how it spreads. But sticky willy is a great one for spring as well. We're talking about all the spring plants right now, because spring is here in the Southern Plains. And so this medicine right here, this plant relative, is good for a spring tonic, and it also it's good. It's an anti-diuretic. It's a anti-inflammatory. It does all kinds of great things for your body in that transition period between winter and spring. So, and it's even good in a salve on the skin for like eczema and things like that. This is a little different than chickweed, but it's a good complement to chickweed if you're making topical ointments. And Cleavers is in the same plant family as coffee is. Unfortunately, it doesn't have the great benefit of having caffeine like coffee does, but interesting to note that these are related, coffee and cleavers. So here we're looking at another plant relative that's great for spring and really any time during the growing season. It's what's known as yellow dock or curly dock. Rumex crispus is its Latin name. And it's another plant. They call it yellow root sometimes. And Ozawa jibuk, I think, is what it's called in the language. But this plant is, all parts are edible, And it's in the same family as buckwheat, so like your Japanese soba noodles, that is the same plant family. And the seeds are edible as a grain. The leaves are edible as a green, and then the root is edible as a tea and a medicine. And some people, like I said, call it yellow root, and that yellow root is what tells me it's good for the liver. And so if you were using the leaves, you would want to blanch them or boil them a couple times over, because these leaves contain oxalic acid, which makes your tongue kind of feel fuzzy like spinach. If you eat a lot of raw spinach, you get that same feeling. I know I do, at least, if I even eat a little bit of raw spinach. So that's why you gotta break down the oxalic acid by boiling these and preparing them as a green, like a spinach, like you'd boil your spinach, or if you're doing collards or something like that. It's a bitter green. So again, that bitter flavor, we generally don't get a lot of that bitter flavor in our modern diet, but that bitter flavor is really important for our health and our digestion. And if you can shift your palate a little bit to contain more bitters, it's a really good thing for your health, your overall health, because it helps it helps your gallbladder produce enzymes to help you digest your food better, and clean out your liver and your kidneys as well. So this is the greens, and then in the summer you'll see the tall stalk of flowers that are pink, and then the seeds in the fall. So what I was going to say about the root is, when you're working with roots and root medicines, it's always good to make sure you're not leaving a hole. Leave the place where you are gathering at the same or better than you when you got there, just as a measure of respect. And then also, working with the moon cycles is I was taught that it's important, and I try to follow it. Sometimes I can't follow it, and but generally speaking, so when you're harvesting roots, you would want to wait for a new moon, when the gravitational pull of the moon is pulling all of the waters and resources down from the leaves into the root. And also when you think about this too, in the fall, after the growing season, the medicine in the root would be stronger, because it has the whole summer to accumulate that medicine. And then in the spring, after the long winter of not growing, is when it is the weakest or most diluted. So that's just a little bit about seasonality, the things that I were taught, at least. There are, of course, lots of other teachings that people follow. And like I was going to say, here we can look at the root and why it's called yellow root. You can see that it definitely has a yellow hue to it, and it's spring now, so obviously it's going to be less yellow because there's less medicine in it, the compounds that make it yellow. Anthocyanins, I think, is what they're called. But yeah, so you'd want to slice this and then dry it to preserve it for teas, and it's a great liver tonic, a liver medicine. Cleans you out, helps your liver expel toxins. All right, looks like we have some chickweed here, and it looks like it might just be flowering. So chickweed is a plant in the periwinkle, or the pink family, Caprifoliaceae, and it is flowering. It's just reaching the end of its season. It's one of those plants that has a really quick spring season, but the spring foliage, there's great green. It's kind of light and lettucey, and mucilaginous a little bit. So it's a great fresh green that you can add to your dishes as garnishes, or you can make a wild green salad with dandelions, chickweed, whatever, violets, whatever you have around. And but it's also a great medicine. And this medicine is good for skin ailments as a topical medicine. And then it's good for internally. You can use it to help with your mucous membranes and help clear your, when you're sick, clear your throats and stuff like that. It's a plant that can be found growing all across North America. It's kind of a weedy plant as well. A lot of these spring plants are weedy plants. They take advantage of the time when there's not a lot of other plants growing. But yeah, it can be found in lawns, in parks, on street edges, ditches, anywhere that's somewhat open. Even in openings in forest, you can find it. And but in the spring, it's a great spring plant. And I always add it to my salads in the spring. Here we're standing in front of Henbit, Lamium amplexicale, and it's in the mint family, and it's another spring ephemeral plant, an annual that is great medicine, and it is also a good fresh herb or green. And you can see this is a whole patch of many different little tiny plants. It's a close relative of dead nettle or purple dead nettle, and the only difference really being that this henbit has a leaf that is fully wrapped around the stem, whereas the purple dead nettle has two leaves that kind of clasp on either side. And you know that you have a mint family because the stems are square, and you can feel that when you roll it in your finger. But this plant grows all over North America. It's another kind of weedy plant that you find in gardens, in parks and lawns and stuff like that. It's a great pollinator plant because it's one of the earliest plants that bees, native bees, can take advantage of. And if you're using it as a medicine, it's good anti-diuretic, it's good anti-inflammatory, it's good for as a mild antibacterial. It's a good spring plant, and you can use it as garnishes or in your cooking, but it's got kind of a fuzzy leaf, so like adding it as the main character in a dish is kind of overpowering. But definitely a good spring plant to know, and it grows everywhere, so easily available no matter where you are. Down here in the southern plains, spring happens in March, but further north it's a month or two later. And yeah, this is henbit, or Lamium amplexicale, and it's in the mint family. Here we have one of our 4 most sacred foundational medicines, wabskiabiak, or white sage, and this is what is known as Artemisia ludoviciana, subspecies mexicana, or just southern white sage, southern prairie sage. And it's a little different than your California sage that you find in being sold at powwows and gift shops around. but it's our native sage, which we have all over North America. The white sage, the California white sage that you get at powwows in little bundles, only grows in a couple counties in California. So this was readily available for native people all over, and it has a kind of a different smell than if you're used to burning white sage, and it's a great plant. You can make a mild tea of it, but it's really strong, so you got to be careful. But I like to use it when you're burning sage, when you're smudging. It's a antibacterial, antimicrobial, and that smoke has been shown in scientific studies to actually clear the bacteria and viruses from the microbes from the area. Another way you can use it is you can break up your dried sage bundle and you throw it in a pot of water, boiling water, on the stovetop, and you can use it kind of as a essential oil almost in your house, and through the boiling water, the vapor, it kind of just permeates all throughout your house. And I did that a lot this winter and over the last year during COVID, because there's lots of sickness around, and this is a white sage, Wabskiabuk, is a great medicine, and one of our 4 foundational medicines, the others being weengosh, or sweetgrass, and then there's sema, tobacco, and gishki, white cedar. If you're interested in knowing more about white sage, there's a great link on the web page in the language department, and Justin Neely does a good explanation on those 4 foundational medicines. So I just wanted to say thanks for attending, listening to this presentation, this walk with us. Thanks for coming along. I hope you all had a wonderful time. Miigwech, mina bamapi.